What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Rolling Credits. I am joined as always by Gums, Pat, and Kirby. Say hello, guys.
What's going on?
Hi, guys.
What up?
If you don't know me by now, I'm Seth, of course. Today, we wanted to get our fight on. One of our residents, Pat, here is a expert MMA fighter. So we wanted to kind of just go
Disclaimer,
ahead.
I have never fought MMA. Just a heads up on that. I trained jiu-jitsu for 2 years, but do not quote me as an expert. I will get my ass beat on the street.
So he's an expert.
Not if you fall to the ground.
Yeah.
Come to mount you.
I'm gonna do the butt scoop. I'm just trying to sit on the ground.
There you go.
Come to my guard, son.
Bro, those memes are so good.
They're great. They're phenomenal.
Memes, that's real life.
Memes, videos, TikToks, whatever you want to call it. Either way, I'm excited for this episode. We're going to talk about all kinds of different fighting movies, MMA fighters, UFC fighters, all that kind of good stuff. So, since this is going to be your show today, Pat, take us off.
I'm all in. And Seth's selling himself short a little bit here as the guy who has recently started to pick up a little bit of boxing.
Let's go.
He's done some kickboxing lately, trying to figure out which martial art is he most identifies with and figures out what he enjoys. But it's all good. We're all here to. I think we've sat down and watched UFC fights together outside of you and me, Gums. But you like anime. Most fighters like anime. You're in the realm. We're gonna figure it all out together as it is. But we're gonna be talking a lot about kind of fighting movies, just the wide variety of fighting movies, whether that be things all the way from Fight Club to Karate Kid and everything in between. So I've got a lot of good stuff kind of talking about. But I kind of wanted to start us off here in the real life world before we get into it and talk a little bit about I feel like everybody always had that friend growing up. Then I hear it more now in the jiu-jitsu community than when I talk about it more than anybody else. That when you bring something up that you train, or even just in passing when you're watching a UFC fight at somebody's house, goes, "Oh yeah, I took karate as a kid," or I took taekwondo classes growing up. I totally know everything about fighting. Or you always love that guy at the MMA watch party that says, "Man, I totally could win in fights like this, man. It's just my mentality, bro. That's all. I'm built different." I want to know, are you that guy, for starters? And then B, are you guys fans of the sports? Whether it be boxing, MMA, is there a certain style that you guys like? Are you guys fans in general? Seth, we'll start with you. Kick us off.
So it's funny you say that. I do know a few of those guys. I don't want to say I'm one of them, but I did watch a lot of MMA growing up, especially in high school. Disclaimer, I did get in a fight in high school, and the only reason I won that fight is because of me watching MMA and how to throw a sweet right hook.
Everybody's got those ones. Everybody's got a few that they know.
There's definitely... Yeah, those are always the best conversations to get into because they're like, "Oh, dude, I could take that person at the bar or whatever," and then they just end up getting their ass kicked.
First of all, if you don't walk into any public area and look at all the threats and assess and say, "If I could beat that dude's ass," then what are you really doing? I walk through the mall. I go through the grocery store. I go to the regular store. I'm like, yeah, I can beat that dude's ass. It doesn't matter. You got to be confident.
And that was we were kind of joking around about jiu-jitsu memes beforehand, before this, that the other meme I really like is I always say there's a meme that'll be titled guys who say they can win a fight. It'll be a pie chart, and 2% of it will be guys that actually train any kind of combat sports, and 95% or 98% says it's just my mentality, bro. I'm built different. I always love that. Guys that just build scenarios in their head out of fucking left field and be I could beat everybody here.
Those types of people just love getting their ass beat though, because they can take a punch and they're like, well, I don't give a fuck. Let's get in a fight.
Technically, they're probably 50-50. Yeah, they're probably 50-50 because they've got the experience. You know what I mean? Yeah. If they already have that mentality, they get into a couple scraps. But if they fight somebody that knows actually what they're doing, they're going to lose. That's just is what it is.
I know
a wild card.
I know you asked about if part of the questions is if we've ever trained any form of combat sports, and like you said, I just started doing kickboxing and boxing, so that's kind of my extent to that. Besides doing karate as a kid, but I feel like every parent made their kid do karate.
False, and I'm just built different.
What did you say, Gums?
I wrestled the wrestlers, bro. I was built different, bro.
Hey, I did wrestling in high school too.
Wrestling.
No, I wasn't on the team. I wasn't
you
on
were
the
just
team.
wrestling.
I was
Cool.
just wrestling. I was working at DoorDash at the time, and I'd fuck around and wrestle PJ all the time, who was a collegiate like
Oh yeah, PJ's
top
scary.
wrestler. I just wrestle with him, man.
Yeah,
I wrestle wrestlers. I'm built different.
He's scary.
Wrestlers are fucking wild. Wrestlers are a different fucking breed. I literally had a class with a wrestler an hour and a half ago. Got my ass fucking beat. I can tell you that right now. Like,
Facts. Because they have no in between. It's either 0 or 100. There's no like, I'll go 50%, bro. No, they're just like, I'm just gonna go all in. It's just all I know.
it's all gas and scrambles. Like they're just moving constantly. Like it's insane.
Gotta learn how to sprawl.
Yeah. But you said so you are a fan of the sport though. You're a big fan of MMA.
Yeah, I grew up watching it. I love that kind of stuff.
Who's your favorite fighter right now in the UFC?
Israel, man.
Is he?
Yeah, he's so good.
Coming up.
Yeah.
So I
Stylbender's
second.
legit.
Yeah.
He's
Israel,
actually
like,
the answer for one of my questions later on.
Oh, there you go. Well,
Right.
Gums, let's just roll it your way a little bit here. How do you feel kind of about like the sport in general? Did you always kind of know those guys that you said you were more of the wrestler type, not really take as much taekwondo, but
Yeah, for
where do
sure.
you stand?
So actually, as a kid, growing up, I knew this man by the name of Wayne Douglas, who is now a stunt coordinator for a crap ton of movies. I mean, let me see if I pull this up here. He's touched a little bit of everything, but he was also a 15-time world champion in karate, in the bow staff, and a few other a few other competitions.
Yeah,
So
that's really cool.
like growing up with him, he was just bringing these fat ass trophies all the time. So it was just like really fun to see. So I was lucky enough to actually know somebody who was doing that and competing at that age. And I think he competed till 2002. So we're probably, I don't know, 10, 11. I don't know how old we were at the time.
Sure.
But he was a 15-time like world champion in different, they have like 3 different, let's call them like classes. Like you'd have like middle, heavy, whatever. They have their own like little classes and leagues, so to speak, like ISCA, US Open. They just have all this stuff. And ISCA's ISKA World Championship. So, and so they just like have all this stuff. So he won all this stuff. I knew him. Actually, at his house, I met the Blue Power Ranger at the time for that year.
No way.
That's sick.
Yeah. And for whatever
What a
year that
drop.
was, it was like
Yeah.
2001. And then he started acting that around that time too, before he left Minnesota and went to California to start like his acting career. And so he started doing some acting. He had like cameos as like a young Lex Luthor. Dude, I'll send you guys his what is it, the IMDb. Yeah, I'll send it because he's done a lot of stunt coordinating too for like Uncharted, The King's Man, Army of Dead, Jedi: The Fallen Order video game. I mean, you name it, dude.
nice.
He's done quite a lot. It looks like Man of Steel.
I was gonna
so
say
like
those are big titles.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that's
and
pretty big name.
he did like stunts in the stunt coordinators or jumps up in those suits, for those video games. And I was supposed to go out and visit him before COVID, but COVID hit and it kind of canceled it. And it's one of those friends you lose track of because he's so dang busy. But it's like, hey, if I see you in the streets, we're gonna say hi,
Yes.
And so we talked just not, right before COVID hit, and he was like, I was like, I'm coming out, and he was like, all right. And then COVID hit. We were like, all right, we're rescheduled. So I owe him a visit. I really look forward to just talking with him about it, and maybe one day we can even have him on the cast just
That'd be
talking
awesome.
about it.
Cool. That'd be
Yeah.
badass.
But anyway, so
Absolutely.
to rotate over, that he did the karate. I didn't have to do no karate. It wasn't until high school where I started wrestling the wrestlers, just because I played football. So the wrestlers would always want me to work out with him. And, I was a decent size. So, you mess around and wrestle the wrestlers. So you kind of pick up little skills. My cousin was a wrestler. He also does jujitsu, and now he did a couple fights already. So he's a little younger than me, but he's like 6'2", 240. He's just a big dude.
Woo!
I've seen
Big
him
boy.
pick up fridges, stack them on top of other fridges. Like he's got country strength. And I've probably said this before on the podcast. So, I know a little bit about that. My favorite fighter right now is going to be the Stylebender. I like his vibe. But before that, like I grew up in the time where there will never be a greater rivalry between Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz.
Oh yeah.
And,
OG.
and so I just really thought that was like that was like the WWF, like when The Rock and Steve Austin, like that was my highlight for that. Nowadays I'll watch it if it's on, if there's a big fight coming on, but like back then is when I was like actually like, yo, this is sick.
That OG Chuck Liddell Tito Ortiz rivalry was great. And as a guy who grew up in Huntington too, it was the funniest thing because like Tito being a Huntington guy, but even then, a lot of dudes from Huntington were a little bit more on the Chuck rally than I think because Tito was doing some wild shit that like people were just associating that with Huntington Beach, and I was like, dude, come on, because you got to remember that like we had like Rampage Jackson before that, like a lot of really big fighters that came out of Huntington.
He was a beast
and whatnot. So those OG UFC years though, a lot of those were some wild times, some really great rivalries. Way less rules, so you just saw some outlandishly violent shit. Yeah, so I mean, but that though I will agree with you there. That rivalry is top tier. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, it was. And then you had like George St. Pierre around that time. Like it was just like a lot of high class shit that was going on, and they could fight. But anyways, I actually prefer the jiu-jitsu and the Muay Thai over the karate and the other styles of karate. I think those two styles are my favorite to watch. I went to a gym once, and they tried to recruit me after, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm just built like a box. So they're just like, yeah, like how'd you get that body? And I was like, I was born this way. And they're like, man, they were just like, yo, because they wanted to like have me in there to be in there and like transform me into a fighter, because they seen it like, oh, you could do it. And I was like kicking the bag, and I missed the bag one time and fucking fell, which is really hilarious. And like I got up, but I was working on my side kicks. I never learned how to do it. And then they started watching me just murder this bag. And then they pulled me over. They just pulled me over and said, hey, next class, I know this is your first class, but next class, you're going to come in with us over here. And I was just like, shit. But I'm built different, right? I'm just competitive. Yeah. I'm competitive. Sure. So, I try to pick that shit up and I enjoy it. So that's my whole story. That's the answer to that question.
And I think kind of just like tailing off of your point there a little bit, talking about you're being more into Muay Thai Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that. I might piss off some of the people that are more of like the big into Taekwondo and karate and stuff. And don't get me wrong, those have very certain practical applications, but I've listened to a lot of like big commentary on the sport and stuff like that, especially as it revolves around UFC and MMA and whatnot. It's pretty definitive that like in terms of like practical like applications of martial arts, the main things that you really want to have skills with is boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and wrestling. And like things outside of that, I'll accept kickboxing as well as a substitute for Muay Thai, especially with you have guys like Izzy and the way that they do it. But the problem that really sits with things like karate and Taekwondo is that they do pretty poorly in terms of in close space, like when someone closes the distance, and they do shitty on the ground. So like if you get anybody that can box and close the gap, you're kind of screwed, or somebody who knows how to throw an elbow or a knee or get you to the ground on a takedown. And once you're on the ground, what are they doing? So that's where those styles kind of fail in a lot of ways. But it's kind of the progression of what MMA has kind of brought into the popular culture now.
I had to interject here real quick and go back to Chuck Liddell because I've met him twice. So the first time was at Coachella in 2014. Dude was in the VIP section listening to Monsters and Men. I just had to drop that.
Was he blitzed out of his mind?
He was pretty fucking high.
I was going to say, I could see him just being tossed.
He is. The second time, my dad actually was going to build him and his family a house in Bullhead City. And he was also tossed at that time because my dad said that he must have been on some kind of crazy drugs because he could not stop shaking and twitching. So
that doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
Chuck Liddell, great guy. He loves the Monsters and Men.
Between that and concussions, I'm sure he's
yeah. Mm-hmm. Kirby, I want to finish it off with you here. Kind of what's your take? Were you that guy growing up a little bit? Do you watch a lot now, or do you stand?
I was that kid that took like all of about 2 or 3 classes of karate. I'm like, this really isn't for me. I'm a lover. I'm not a fighter. I'm really not. But like, okay, so in my like late teens, early 20s, like I was living in a house, it was like the party house, bunch of people coming over, and a lot of them were actually like had studied a lot of martial arts through the years. So we'd be in the backyard, like having drinks, and everybody's kind of like sparring and shit. And so I'd start like talking to the guys, I learned a couple of things, and it was like a wide range, like Aikido, like Kung Fu, Muay Thai, like just regular karate, like jujitsu. So it was like, okay, like this is how you throw like a punch in this style. This is how you block. This is how you do this. This is how you throw somebody, blah, blah, blah. So like I've picked up little things and I've sparred and stuff, but I've never done any like actual like training or anything like that.
I want to pop in here and say that Kirby told me this story while he was in Vegas this past weekend.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that.
I've never been able
to
get it out of my head of just Kirby throwing just a fucking nasty question mark kick. I just for some reason I have it in my head that like Kirby's got a high kick to fucking like shake my bones, and I can't get it out of my head. I have no reason why, but he tells me the story. I'm like, this guy's got it in him. I don't know what it is, but he's got it.
It's because he's metal, dude. He plays like rock shows, and he's got to have a good kick.
Yeah. It's funny because the metal thing is what keeps me mellow. That's where all my aggression comes out.
Which is such a metal thing to say. I know so many dudes who are into metal that are like, dude, it just calms me. And I'm like, what the fuck?
But it's not a high kick, it's a low kick, because one of the things that I was taught was go for the joints. So if you come at me, the first thing I'm doing is blowing out your kneecaps.
Oh, I mean, you watch any UFC fight right now, what are they doing? They're lighting up that front leg.
Oh, yeah.
And by the end of the goddamn fight, it's like, dude, this guy has no cartilage left in his knee. Like, and I'm just concerned.
One of my favorite things that I learned was like, my buddy's like, all right, if somebody throws a punch at you, catch their wrist, pull their arm up, and just with this knuckle right into the armpit, and that whole side of the body just goes dead because it's a pressure point. Yeah, it's a nerve, and like that, you're just gonna knock the whole side of the body. Like,
I was gonna say, bro, the chance of you landing that
it's actually better than you would think. If you have control of the wrist, you control the arm.
That.
Well, I think what you guys got to realize for what Kirby's talking about is clearly no gloves on. Like,
I'm talking like
street fight.
If you're in the street,
gloves,
yeah. But I tell you what, if you've ever grabbed somebody's wrist in a real fight, they're not gonna let you like sit there. So they're gonna yank that bitch back and get all crazy and throw kicks. And people
that's
are just
why you gotta be faster than they are.
What is that?
That's why you got to be real strong, real firm, and very technical with it. Just go. Do what you're supposed to do
and practice
and hope that
Which that will be my disclaimer for the podcast. Do not be getting fucking street fights.
Don't.
For those of us that do train,
if you're not going out to fight after this podcast, what are you doing?
Go for the knee.
Don't try this at home,
Gums
kids.
Completely negated what I was just saying. Go fuck some people up, I guess. I don't know.
My bad.
We endorse violence. These hands do not discriminate. Yeah.
I just think of those videos. The video, like where they're pointing the gun at the person, and they like try to like move his hands out of the way, and then it just shows them like in heaven.
Did you see that? Cop that was like funny. Teaching those like
that's
those,
the one.
like classes or whatever. Did you see the one guy who just like he's like trying to demonstrate his technique or whatever, and the guy just backs up and like, and everyone's like, "What the fuck, dude?"
I feel those Steven Seagal videos.
What were you saying, Kirby? Sorry,
Kirby,
I was like, that's like, so that's the extent of any of my involvement in martial arts. I just like learned funny little like things. Like I can throw a mean ass elbow into a fridge door and put some dents in. So if I get close enough for elbows, you're fucked. But that's it.
Underrated elbow throws are underrated. You can miss your punch, and if you miss your punch and throw and just bend into your elbow, you can still graze their cheekbone. It is so deadly.
Well, you ever see those fights like from the mount or like against the cage where there's not a lot of space. They're close, and then they just like throw that like front elbow, and you're like, oh my god. Like,
isn't that how McGregor got knocked out?
Nasty.
Yeah, see, he did get knocked out once. That way, and like that's such a gnarly way to get punched in the face. Like it's so intense.
Yeah. The hammer fist. You don't underestimate the hammer fist either. It looks weird because it's like, I don't think you're supposed to be coming down like that. But you know what? It is you can break your hand, so be careful. But it is such a strong. It's like how chimpanzees hit shit. They come down, they hammer fist it, and you get so much force out of that. It's disgusting.
Well, it's like if you don't hit like along this knuckle, your hand, because the thing is you have so much padding here on like the heel of your hand, kind of thing, that you can just fucking throw them wildly, pretty aggressively, as long as you don't land on the top of that knuckle and shatter your hand.
Yikes.
But Do you watch any like kind of UFC boxing at all? Like lately,
I don't
you really track?
like.
Yeah.
Like you know, Pat, Seth, you two know that I don't know who anybody is. Like we were out in Vegas and like we did some we were watching that fight and I had no idea who was fighting, and I had no idea who to like bet on. So you guys were going for somebody. I went the exact
McGregor.
opposite way. It was the McGregor fight. That's right.
We tried the shitty whiskey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Terrible proper 12 whiskey.
The proper
Sorry,
12.
man. Your
Holy
whiskey
hell.
sucks.
Sorry, Connor.
Yeah.
It's not it.
But yeah. So I don't really watch it. It's not something I do in my spare time. I have a great time. Like if we're out like drinking and betting and like we're watching a fight, then it's phenomenal. But yeah, I don't know who the hell anybody is.
It's not something you're sitting down and you're like, hey, it's like cards on tonight is what we're doing.
No.
But
I actually really feel that fights, I can come into them so blind and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And because like I don't follow religiously like that either. But I feel like it's one of the few sports where I'm like, I could just come in and be like, I think this guy got it. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
I don't feel such an affiliation. Like there's like a home team with a logo and this and that because it's so 1v1. I just don't feel that same like affiliation. I feel like I can come in and just be like very logical about who I suspect to win that day.
I think you're dead on because even as someone like me who does follow a little closer, right? Especially maybe like I'll usually know around like maybe the top 5 guys within a certain division or something like
Makes
that.
sense,
And then, but even then, like, in a card that, if the guys at the gym are saying, hey, we're going to do a watch party this weekend, cruise over, I got the fight, bring some drinks, we'll hang out. Well, if that's the case, a card's pretty long and you might watch a couple pre-card fights and whatnot of guys that I just have no idea who you are. And that's even kind of in that same vein of like, it looks like this guy's got it, and it might just be a little bit of background on something that he knows. And you're like, that does make it interesting. Like I have no stake in either one of these guys. I have no real knowledge of them, but you know what? We're rooting for the guy in the black shorts today, and hopefully he knocks this dude out. Like, and that's just kind of about it.
I had a question for you, Pat, and I don't know if it's like true or not, but it seems like some of the female fighters are like way more intense than like some of the male fights I've noticed recently.
Dana has made comments on that in the past, in that the female fights become way more like just gnarly and aggressive in terms of the violence and stuff like that. I think that there are certain waves that like can kind of change that. Like a lot of times at heavier weight classes outside of guys like Francis Ngannou and whatnot, is a lot of those heavier weight classes can be a little like, it's kind of like heavyweight boxing where it's like it doesn't get as actionable in terms of like crazy haymakers, punches hit, people taking crazy beatings and whatnot, while maybe welterweight will be a little bit more intense in the men's division. Where at the women's division, they don't go as heavy. It's like 145 and down in terms of weight classes, and they have like 4 or 5 weight classes in that realm. So like, you watch a Rose Namajunas fight, and outside of maybe her last fight, that was super boring, but like they got a lot of the fights in those categories, and think Amanda Nunes and a lot of these other fighters, or like even, these girls that are coming through, and they're crazy fights. They're throwing a shit ton of strikes, like Jingwei Li, the former champion at strawweight, before she was fighting with Rose and whatnot. Some of her early fights, they're fucking super aggressive. I will say the past few cards have been a little bit underwhelming, I think, on some of them, but notoriously, yes, you'll see a lot of those girls just throwing fucking haymakers, coming out super bloody, and just like in some really intense fights, and really fun to watch. For that
they are. I kind of tend to enjoy them sometimes a little bit more than the main card because they just go all out.
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's like they're not getting the same kind of press. No. They're not. There's not as much shock factor in like that one hit. I think you do get a lot more of those like crazy wild knockouts. The Khabib Nurmagomedov choke, like fucking chokeouts that he's doing when he's taking out Conor and doing all like. I think that the press, the shock factor, and the build up to those fights is bigger on the men's side, which is why it gets more press and kind of more views.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really hope that one day MMA opens the weight class up for the ladies and we get to the 150s and the 180s and then the 200s. I'd love to see some of the bigger women go at it. And the reason I believe they get so bloody is exactly what you said, is because they're lighter they have to throw more punches, which then allows them to accumulate more damage. Whereas when you go heavy, you can get knocked out at any time by anything. And typically it doesn't always end up as bloody because you're usually just taking that blow and sitting your ass down. So if you were to also increase the woman's weight class so that there was women that were able to one shot you, not that there isn't now, but just that the chances of you getting one shot by a 200-pound woman are a lot higher than getting one shot by a 35-pound woman, you know? And so like, I want to see that when the 200-pound women come through and just start throwing bombs. And I don't know why they don't have it, but I would fucking love to see it.
I think over time, I think you're going to see it happen. I think it's more of a time-based thing as these and you got to credit it to a lot of the girls in those divisions now, as the girls like Amanda Nunes, like Rose Namajunas, like Jessica Andrade, like just some of these other fighters that are coming in there and really pulling bigger numbers from a views perspective. As those grow, you're going to see necessity. It's just one of those things that funnels. The more that these girls, because you're starting to see a lot of females co-main on big pay-per-view fights. Yeah, they're getting co-main cards. They're right below Dustin Poirier, and their fights going through on Kamaru Usman fights and whatnot. So those are gonna, I think, come over time.
It definitely feels the most fair in terms of like sports, in terms of like hype. Where the women are starting to get like more equal representation. I feel like this sport is a sport that like, they're going in there 1v1 and throwing bombs. It's not team oriented. It's not this, it's not that. And I just feel, I don't know. And it just kind of goes to show why they're getting these co-cards and stuff. It's just like fighting has nothing to do with you dunking a basketball. It's got nothing to do with you putting on pads and hitting somebody. It's your fist, their face. Any human can do it. This is why this is so big for that. And I think
who's
that's
more
like
prepped, who's better, who's more skilled.
Here's your
fucking throw it down.
Technique,
you got 3
baby.
5-minute rounds. Yeah,
That's
convince us otherwise.
Also, I think Kirby would be an Aikido master like Steven Seagal. Like I could just see him. We walk up to him, and all of a sudden our wrists snap down and we fly past him and shit. We're just like, oh my god, look at Kirby on Aikido.
Kirby's secretly
with like a
just
side knowledge
master.
of Kempo, and he's like side knowledge of Kempo, and he's just a blade master. Like,
He's the guy with the butterfly
I may or may
knife.
not have, blades and swords,
He's the guy with the butterfly knife
somewhere.
Oh man. So I'll cap it off. Obviously I'm a big fan now. I didn't train at all as a kid. I was a water sports kid growing up, but I train a lot now. I'd say Kamaru Usman is my favorite fighter right now. I especially seeing the way that he's bulked up and just dominated his division now, that it just seems like he's pretty unstoppable. So I'm excited to see kind of what he winds up doing in that division and just keeps fucking winning these fights. And he seems to be getting more powerful by the day. So I'm really excited for that. But this is a movie podcast. We talk movies, we talk TV shows. So I wanted to get into the meat of the podcast, which is talking about martial arts and combat fighting movies. And I wanted to kind of kick this off because these movies have taken so many goddamn forms in the past 50 years. I mean, we talk from, Rocky to Karate Kid to Never Back Down and everything in between, to street fighting movies like Fight Club and all these other movies that take so many different genres. So I wanted to ask what your guys' favorite movie in this kind of space is and why. Is it a genre specific answer? Is it just a character thing? Do you just identify with a certain movie that you just really fucking love? I'll go the opposite direction now. Let me get with you, Kirby. What you thinking?
I got to go with classic 1973 Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
that is my jam right there. Going back, taking it back. Like it's just like it's got so many iconic like fight scenes, especially when he's like in like the layer of the gang and where they're built like creating their drugs and shit, and he's got the nunchucks and he's fighting with just like waves of dudes. And then of course like the boss fight, he's got like the claw weapon on his hand and stuff. It's a classic movie. That's when you start talking about martial arts movies, that's like the first thing that comes to mind are just like different scenes from that movie.
and like just the appreciation to those styles of movies, like the Japanese, like real, like true jujitsu, not Brazilian jujitsu, of like jujitsu that is like traditional Japanese jujitsu that encompasses like 15 different forms of martial arts.
Yeah.
And like what Bruce Lee brought to the table of like that generation of movie, the influence it had on popular culture and all this shit. Like those are like iconic to this genre.
That style, like that Hong Kong style with like Bruce Lee, Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan, even getting to like Jet Li as we get like to, you know, the more current generation. Like those are when we talk martial arts movies, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. It's just like that style.
You also can't forget that movie was also the first time that Bruce Lee almost lost to fucking Chuck Norris. Talking about 80s action stars. Chuck Norris is the only person who's ever been close enough to beat Bruce Lee. And I think he did actually beat him in a fight.
Well, that's the like, isn't that the kind of the bit they run in what's that Quentin Tarantino movie?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
No,
That
they
was
were just
kinda
making
like-
fun of him.
They were kind of making fun of him, but that's like kind of what they're riffing on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was like that interaction.
Just that he was a little man and he was like doing all this karate, and that like a bigger man could just come and toss your ass around. Basically, was the gist of that. It wasn't necessarily that, but
For sure.
Either way.
Gums, I'll trade over to you. What's your take on this?
Dude, this is just way too fucking stupidly hard for me to like narrow.
It's tough.
Because,
it's really tough.
I tell you what, all the movies nowadays wouldn't be shit without some type of influence of martial arts. Like all the action movies, everybody knows martial arts. They're not even boxing. They're not doing. They're like doing martial arts. Like they are blocking and throwing and flipping and running off walls. And I'm just like, now when did you pick this up? So it's super hard for me to like pick. But I think that I need to mention that the Wing Chun style. When I think of martial arts, that's what I think of is this Wing Chun, and it's used a lot, and it's used a lot from again your favorite karate experts. So I think Ip Man is Wing Chun. I have to research this. But Jackie Chan would use it. Bruce Lee would use versions of it. And basically Wing Chun is mostly what you see in like movies and television mostly. And it has like a lot of close combat like connotations. So whenever they're like real close and they're like slapping each other and they're like doing all the slaps and the moves and the punches and the blocks and the slaps, like most of that is Wing Chun, and it's just because it's so visually appeasing. And they've got a lot of great movies out too. But I think the creator of Wing Chun, I should have researched this more. I think it was actually a woman who then passed it down to a man. And so again, something I need to research. There is actually a movie out about it. And if she wasn't the creator, she was like the first one to use it. I almost want to say it was because she had to use it. But it's just an amazing style. And it's something that we've taken and put into all the movies. And as most people know, that Ip Man was Bruce Lee's master. So of course they knew Wing Chun. And so I just want everybody to say, like, what's your favorite movie? And I would say I'd have to go with anything that still uses Wing Chun as its basis. Nowadays, we use more of that mixed martial arts and that MMA style, which has a really cool aesthetic. It's like super aggressive. I really like the stuff that is more flowing, more like we're trading blows. We're really like technique focused instead of like power bruise fighting focus, which I understand nowadays. Power bruise fighting focus in real life will win, but man, do I love to see a good fucking hand battle and like a kick battle and like just that whole stunt for 10 minutes where they're just going back and forth with their technique. So that's what I'd say for that answer, because I cannot be put into a box with all these amazing martial art movies that I have, and I could go on, so I won't. So
like that's why I asked the question. It's tough. Like the lines you blur in this category are weird. But you bring up a point that is like I thought I was gonna get to it. I don't think I wrote it down at all. But like the representation now of just overall martial arts in in movies and whatnot. Because even in a lot of those movies you reference, a lot of them they're not movies that were necessarily getting the production values that like were the best at the time or winning necessarily a whole lot of awards. But now you see, because of like where those movies started, like they really walked so that movies, even the UFC focused ones like Southpaw, could run, you know, because they made that idea of like just martial arts, people who know martial arts being featured in movies to perform really strong martial arts is valuable. And now you see that with a lot of cameos, even in other action movies from UFC people or other stuff like that. The representation now of different forms of martial arts in movies. I mean, shit, the most recent Mortal Kombat, even you can make an argument of like the level of martial artists that were in that movie that were doing different styles from like what you traditionally see was massive. Like, so I think you're definitely on a point there where it's like those original styles have a lot of value in today's society of movies. Yeah. Seth, what you got for us?
Dude, there's so many like good martial arts films. Like freaking even like the one with Jet Li is a badass movie. As cheesy as some of it was. But you also have films like fucking Kickboxer or, The Raid, which is a fantastic movie. Talk about like, hand-to-hand combat comes. That movie is just straight in your face, just a whole building of just them fighting each other.
It's fucking sick. And I think a lot of that is like, correct me if I'm wrong, Seth, if you know or not. I think a lot of that's the Muay Thai. And that shit is just super aggressive. Like punch kick, your head bounces off wall, I win, flip over the railing.
It's a wild movie. Like The Raid is just nonstop ass kicking, and it is awesome. And it's great too, because a lot of the people, like for example, the guy who plays Sub-Zero is one of the cops in the movie, and there's a big fight in the middle of that movie between him and I forgot the other actor's name, but he's like a really famous martial artist. And I feel like that movie kind of put some of the like fighting movies back on the map, or like that kind of style of fighting. But if I have to pick one, as cheesy as this is, I gotta go with Never Back Down, because like I feel like that's what got me into MMA in the first place. Because it came out in 2008. I was in high school, and that movie was just such an awesome movie. And like, you can't tell me everybody around you was like, after they watched it, they're like, oh, I want to go fight now. Like that movie was a blast. Like even from the opening, the football scene when he just takes off his helmet and just beats the living shit out of the other guy. Like,
I thought that was a super well-made movie.
Yeah, it was just
I thought it was very well done too.
It was just a great,
very well done.
Yeah, great fighting movie, and it kind of, like I said, it got me into MMA.
I think it did for a lot of people. I also think, was that one of the first movies that was really kind of like not boxing, but was more like purely focused on a MMA background? Is there anyone that you guys can think of that really came before that?
That was it.
Not that really stood out and said this is MMA. Not that said this is MMA.
Yeah.
One that has mixed styles has always been around, where it's just not that like Wing Chun, that like fluffy stuff. But nothing that said, hey, we're in 2010, here's some MMA ass kicking. Like, nope.
Yes.
And
because in that space, I think of like Southpaw, I think of Warrior, I think of like those type of movies. I don't think Alex, but I think Never Back Down came first, and I think that came before like all of those by a long shot.
I have it pulled up, and it did come up, which is crazy too, because that's kind of when MMA and UFC got popular again, or got really popular. I
think that was probably around that time. I can't remember when Dana White like really kind of took back over of the UFC, because obviously there was like that time in the early 2000s where it was just like the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was like this shit's just wild. There's like no rules. Everybody's like just a bunch of nonsense going on at the same time, and they weren't really performing very well because it was too wild. And then the structure came in, I think around that like 0809. 2010, maybe 11 or something like that, it was really kind of starting to get like organized.
Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, man, I'm trying to tell you.
I did want to throw one more like bonus at you guys. Have you guys seen Ninja Assassin? The movie is fucking badass.
That shit is one of the best freaking ninja movies I've ever seen in my life.
Good.
In my life.
I don't think I've seen that one.
I've watched it 4 or 5 times.
It is fantastic. It is just, it's so dope.
It needed a sequel.
It does. It's just straight up fighting like ninja style, and it is bro, it's bloody. Like bodies get cut.
Yeah.
And there's like fantasy elements where the dude turns into like a shadow, and like his master is like a shadow, and they're fighting, and because he just learns how to control the ability now after being trained for so long. And I'm just like, this is everything I've ever wanted. Yes.
Yeah. Like, you leave that like, I want to be a fucking ninja.
Yeah, like that was like around the time too where like I was really getting into anime and like really discovering like Naruto's and like these kick-ass like other ninja anime type stuffs, and I was like, they knew what I wanted and they gave it to me. You know, it was great. You gotta see it. It's so good. It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
Honestly,
that'll be on the list. It'll be on the list for sure.
It's fucking dope.
Okay, I'll wrap this one up. For me, similar to Gums, man, this one was tough for me too, and I wrote the goddamn question, so I know this shit was tough. Like, because I've said on the podcast before that like one of my favorite movies of all time is Fight Club, and that still obviously reigns true to me in a lot of ways. But for some reason, I still gotta say, in terms of like how this kind of category breaks down, Warrior always kind of comes in my mind because I love Tom Hardy in that movie. The kind of the way that they shoot that from a UFC MMA type perspective, it's gritty, it's in your face. It's really, it's definitely much of that. You see the really macho guy in the gym that thinks he's better than everybody else, and you see that in almost every MMA, jiu-jitsu, boxing gym, a guy with the big ego that's better than everybody else, that needs to get humbled. The little guy in the corner that can silently beat the shit out of everybody there, and he comes in and wins some big tournament. It's a great story. I love that movie. And I just think it was a very good representation of UFC in and of itself. Story aside, kind of thing, just maybe like in the ring, how it's shot and what it's doing. I think it's very well represented. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably going to take the cake for me in that one. But looking no three in ninjas, this space, but solid. Fair enough. No three ninjas, but solid. As it kind of sits in today's popular culture, especially with streaming and everything, I was kind of looking at it. I noticed definitely in the past 5 to 10 years, I'll even go back to say 2010, like in that era, there was another kind of big resurgence of like either movies or TV shows that were really like focused on like the fighting world, whether it's like, bringing back old IP with like Creed in the Rocky universe or Cobra Kai in the Karate Kid universe, to those like the growth of UFC and seeing movies like Southpaw and Warrior and more Never Back Down movies like 2 and 3 with Michael Jai White and all that kind of stuff, and how those movies progressed. And just kind of wanted to kind of ask you guys kind of why do you think that these consistently will always kind of stay in somewhat popular cultures? Because if you go back, it seems like they never leave. They're always somewhat in the mix there, and they always have some kind of audience, even if they're not necessarily winning awards. And Gums, I'll start with you this time. What you think?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's quite simple. I think America, especially America, we love a fucking underdog. And so it's like one of the easiest ways to create an underdog is have that underdog go through physical violence first. You know, instead of having to go through like, and then, usually a tragedy, but having them go through like a physical violence or just be completely weak, or like, it's the same reason why we like Captain America, even though he's a shitty superhero. He came from nothing. He came from being weak and small with a good heart. You know what I mean? It's kind of what these all focus around, is like these good hearts or like a good sense of justice. And we as America just have this like cop complex where we're like, we need to have this good sense of justice, and if we can do it, then we should do it. The underdog should win. And I really think that's where the resurgence comes from. I think that when that's why they stay so relevant, and that way when you can make a good one of those, a good underdog movie, you're gonna get 9 out of 10 awards. And so that's kind of like my opinion piece on that. Like, why have they come back in the last 5 to 10 years? Well, look at the last 5 to 10 years, man. It's been pretty shitty. So, those are always the best movies to really, the uplift, time for those movies to come and uplift you, saying, hey, I know we're down and out right now, but, you too can rise to the top and become a multimillionaire boxer because your dad was a multimillionaire boxer. You just have to be born into it and have these easy access ways. No, I'm just kidding.
You went into the plot of Daredevil for a second.
I was gonna say, wow, this point really turned. I was like, where did we get?
You just have to have all these privileges and you'll be fine.
It really is the same character arc though every time in these movies though, huh? I mean, I get why it works. It's a character arc in like 90% of movies. The less fortunate, underprivileged guy goes over some crazy obstacles so that he can get the girl and gets hurt in his final fight, but still wins the fight. You know,
never back down.
Every time.
Never back down. Like Karate
time.
Kid stabs his shin like every fucking time. Like yeah. So it is kind of funny how that works, and you know, but I guess that I'll ask you this first, guys, before I move on to everybody else too. What do you think is the difference between like the movie that has that same character arc, but obviously maybe doesn't win all the awards, but it gets a big box office number, gets a lot of like that cult following, versus the one that's recognized very well as, you know, like an award-winning movie? What's the difference between like, you know, just maybe like, I'll even say Never Back Down versus Rocky? Like where does the line get there?
You had like an example for me. So like cult classic, right, is Never Back Down, right? Yes. And then Rocky is obviously like an award,
the acclaimed movie kind of thing.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's the draw of the main characters and actors that are portraying these people. Mm-hmm. If these folks are already famous and then they portray these people, chances are you're going to win a lot more awards because you have recognition already. And so the reason cult classics become cult classics is because they're always under the radar. And then once people see them, they're like, holy shit, how did I miss this? Mm-hmm. And then they become some of their favorite movies. So it's really like, I bet you right now you couldn't name the lead actor of that movie of Never Back Down.
No, I couldn't either.
He hasn't done anything since then. The only person from that movie is Dijman Hausa that I remember.
Yeah, or Amber Heard. Amber Heard's in that movie.
Amber Heard.
And people forgot. And the only reason you know that's from the case recently, who just grabbed his shoes up.
1,000%. Yeah. 1,000%.
So my
I want a
point
sequel
is
of that movie, by the way, of her just trying her redemption arc is her getting in the ring with Johnny Depp, but she has to lose the fight.
I hope that me and Kirby can make a movie one day where, like, in the opening arc, the main character gets punched and lights out, and then at the final arc, we see how he got punched and lights out, and then the movie ends. And the guy never wins.
There's no redemption arc. Yeah. I'm in on that.
It's funny that
people would hate that.
It's funny that you single me out on that, because that's exactly what I would do. I would be that guy.
No, you're not. But like, people would absolutely hate that movie.
Yeah.
Because they love the predictability. Like, they love, as much as they say, oh, this is so predictable, it's a damn lie. Because once you get something unpredictable, 90% of the times, the first time you see it, you hate it, and then you got to watch it again and be like, oh, I kind of like it, and then by the fourth time, maybe you're singing a different tune low key. So anyways, yes, I feel like that's really the main difference, is who's selling the tickets. If The Rock's in it, Rock's been in some shitty movies, but because he's in it, guess what? That shit sells, and he sells on his charisma, because if you put anybody else in that role, it would not have worked. And you're just like, this is a shitty movie, but The Rock carried it on his fucking back. Jumanji, the last Jumanji. Gosh, I mean, guys.
Yeah.
What the fuck are we watching here? There was the original Jumanji, and then all of a sudden we get these two newer Jumanjis that are like, I'm in a video game. And I'm like, okay, I kind of get it, but you went really far off the rails here. And that's my opinion. So
I was going to say, too, you also have to take into consideration today, like, sources like Rotten Tomatoes and Twitter and things like that. Like, back in the day, like, reviews weren't really that big of a thing. Like, you saw a movie trailer, you're like, let's go see a movie. And then you'd read about it in the newspaper. But you're, like, just throwing this shit down your throat nowadays, like, on every type of channel. Like Top Gun. Mm-hmm. Everybody said that movie was amazing. And it's the highest opening for any Memorial Day weekend movie ever. So I think
Great
that also
planning,
plays
by
a
the
part.
way. Military movie on military weekend. All right. You know, I heard this guy, according to Seth, that fucker's always running his mouth about movie reviews.
Talking all this shit. Check in on Instagram.
Check him out on Instagram, man, according to Seth.
Instagram and TikTok.
Thanks for the drop.
So you can talk shit in his comments. You know, just go nuts. Oh man! But I think Seth, I think you brought up a really good point there. So I'll cycle kind of into you there. That like the existence, at least relative to the question of like the last 5 to 10 years and how that applies with like Twitter and Rotten Tomatoes, it like kind of begs that question of like, how do a lot of those movies in like the 90s and like the 70s movies that we all kind of said we all love, how do those translate? You release those obviously with different budgets and everything like that, with the existence of Rotten Tomatoes and Twitter. Do you think that affects those movies in a much different way? Like, and what do you think the outcome of that is?
I definitely think it affects them. And I also think too, another thing that came to my mind is like the CGI and different ways that they film movies is so much different. Like back in the day, movies had more story than they do now. Like now it's just a lot of action. Like think Marvel, like just shit blowing up all the time. So
quick cut galore.
Yeah. So
quick cuts every left and right.
Like Rocky is all like an amazing story. Like it's a great film, and that's why it won awards. And like you go to movies today that are just like fighting movies, like The Raid, for example. Like there isn't much said in that film. It's just them kicking the shit out of each other throughout the whole movie. So I think that also takes part of it as well, for sure.
I think kind of how you talk about CGI too is that like a lot of those movies in like the 70s and 80s and stuff like that, you had a lot of stuntmen, people who were doing their own stunts, or things that were like either they were cabled but they were still live action shot. Yeah. So if they looked funky but like you knew kind of what was going on, there was a weird period there in like 2006 to like 2014, 15, where CGI just really sucked. It was shitty. It was like you were better off like shooting those weird other live action stunts. And now I think that we've progressed to a point where we can actively say more likely than not that CGI is pretty damn good. Yeah. And we're really good at it. So like I think that's another kind of disparity you can kind of see between the eras, where it's like you had to have these really story driven fighting movies that you knew you were going to have to get maybe a little cheesy for the stunts, and then you get into the CGI era where people kind of maybe leaned a little too heavy and they got kind of shitty, and then now we're kind of starting to see the resurgence of like good CGI, which led into good stunts, good action, good quick cuts that made it kind of a little more well-rounded.
Yeah.
And which kind of switched it up. And
to Gums's point too about being like the underdog, I think, that's also changed with movies, is like, it's an escape, kind of like with horror movies. It allows people to watch people get the shit beat out of them. Same with like why people like UFC. It's not like most of those people after the fight are going to go to a bar and fight somebody. It's an escape. Yes. It's an escape for someone, and it's a way for them to kind of like Gum said, root for the underdog, but
role
also
play.
Yeah, exactly, role play.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Kirby, what do you think? You got to kind of take on the kind of what kind of popularizes like this style of movie. Like what maybe kind of brings it to the fold? Well,
I think that honestly, I think Gums really said it best. It's really, that story arc of some sort of like underdog story, or the beginning of the movie, somebody's family is killed and they have to go hunt them down, and you get like all these movies called like The Path of Justice or The Way of Vengeance. I just made those up right now, but they're probably movies somewhere.
They're for sure
you made that so convincing. I would be so I wouldn't bat an eye if you told me that those were real productions. Like
so I think that's really what it is, like the story aspect of it. Like it's that underdog story and everybody loves that. But on the other side of it, you have like the choreography, the physicality of the whole thing. And that, like, to me is really an interesting part of it, to kind of watch and see how the fights play out, because they really fall into like one of like two camps. It's either like, the Hong Kong style, like choreography. It's almost like a dance. And then there's just like that guy that just beating the fuck out of people. Like it's just brutal. So I think, the combination of those things is really what, draws the attention of the general public.
And I'll double down on your category comment about like those being the two styles. Even within those two styles, I think that you can like, and I'll kind of connect into Seth's point a little bit too, of like those movies are either in two routes. either like really well done from a story driven perspective and they can tell it well, or just wildly corny. And there's just like really no middle ground in between. And like either, and even then, sometimes corny not bad. Corny can be like, sometimes you're like, it's so bad it's good. And we'll actually get to that later. But like they'll be like certain ones you're like, holy shit, what the fuck am I watching? I need this on repeat. Like it's all
I've got one for that too. I'll be surprised if anybody's heard of it. So
okay, fair enough. Oh man, but okay, I'll get into a couple quick ones here. We've been kind of riffing for a while, which has been great. But I want to talk about, obviously, with the rise of UFC and even boxing for that matter. You know, you see Floyd with all the success that he's had, you know, and everything kind of in between on there. The relevance into pop culture. And how it's transitioned those people into acting roles and acting gigs. Think people like Ronda Rousey that have kind of made the full gauntlet on all that kind of stuff. Would you guys have a favorite like cameo that you guys see in a lot of these movies? Because mine, for me in particular, is not even necessarily the cameo that like exists in like a big box action movie or something like that, like going into like some of these other movies. I love those little roles where like a UFC fighter or a boxer is supposed to be super knowledgeable in like a character driven setup, and they're coaching somebody that is just worthless. And I found a clip that was of Chuck Liddell in Kick-Ass 2 when he's sitting in the corner of I can't remember what the villain's name is. The guy whose dad gets killed in the first one, but he's like the main villain in the second one. And he's supposed to be his corner guy teaching him how to fight or whatever. And he's like, you know, MMA is like a chess game. Like the guy I brought in really knows his stuff. You hope your guy really knows his, you know, we're going to get him kind of really set up and just gets his ass beat I love just that little, totally like worthless, like little plug for Chuck Liddell. And I think those are hilarious. Yeah. What do you guys got for this one? Kirby, I'll start with you because I kind of got you right in front of me.
Mine was just seeing GSP in The Winter Soldier, Joe St. Pierre, like just kind of like shows up. I was like, whoa, all right. And it was great for me because it was one of the few dudes that I would recognize. I'm like, oh shit, okay. Like, but yeah, I think that was cool. And like had a really cool like, you know, fight scene and stuff in that as well. So that'd be mine. Yeah,
that's a good little cameo. I mean, GSP, like you said, as a jiu-jitsu guy, you gotta love GSP. Guy basically popularized the entire thing, you know, outside of like Hoyer Gracie in like the 2000s or something like that. But that's even not as much of a recognizable name unless you tried by a Gracie gym. But I thought about that one. That's a great cameo. Love that one. Yeah, I'll go Seth. What you got?
So I have two. The first one, the first one is Donald Cerrone and Paul Felder in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where it's so great.
Where's Donald Cerrone in It's Always Sunny? I watched that show religiously, so I can't remember.
It's the episode titled Wolf Cola. So but Mac and Charlie sell a beverage to help athletes to cut weight, and all it does is cause people to sweat, vomit, and just fucking have like explosive diarrhea. And Paul Felder's just puking his brains out in the episode.
It's Wolf Cola and Fight Milk.
Yeah.
Are the two products they sell. Holy shit, I forgot about that.
I love that show. There's so many references, but I love that one. And then Chuck Liddell showing up in Entourage and just fucking...
That's another good one.
Yeah. Those two. They're great.
Don't Donald Cerrone and Felder, don't they like pop for like TRT or some shit too at the end of it? Or like some crazy like horse tranquilizer or some crazy shit. Like, and they can't fight in their fight that they were cutting weight for. I'm a big buff for that show as well. I can't believe you caught me on that one. I totally forgot about that episode. That's a great one.
Yeah, I love that show. You'll have to go watch it.
Yeah, I'm going to go watch that after this. Gums, what you got?
Willie Nelson. He's a 5th degree black belt. Just whatever he pops up in, just know he's a fucking black belt.
Is Willie Nelson a 5th degree jiu-jitsu black belt? Is he really?
You just go ahead and Google it right now, and you tell me. It might not be in jiu-jitsu, but he's definitely like a 5th degree black belt.
I want to smoke weed with him and go do some karate.
So Google that.
I'm on it right now.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Willie Nelson celebrates 81st birthday with black belt.
What the?
It's in a Korean black belt. It's in a Korean martial art that I don't really recognize, but it's somewhat similar to Taekwondo. It's not quite Taekwondo, but it's always sometimes reported as Taekwondo, apparently.
Taekwondo for the elderly. Let's go, baby. The point is, whenever you see him now, he's cameoing as a martial artist. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I thought that was just like a fun
Fair.
piece of knowledge to throw out there. I don't think a lot of people realized he did that.
I wouldn't have done it at all.
But I actually, because I wasn't too familiar with like enough people to figure out where they did it. I do like when they pop up and they're usually, or like they're the dumb people. And it's like, I don't know how to fight. And they're just like, they're just like the all stars of the time. But I actually really enjoyed Mike Tyson in Ip Man 3. And it was just because why the hell is Mike Tyson in Ip Man 3? Like, I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it. Their fight was like 4 minutes long. So it was a large part of the movie. And I don't think it's something I'll forget because it was like a weird cultural crossover. And there was also like a language barrier. And it was like, yo, this is like crazy. Like what is happening? And of course, he's like punching through shit and breaking it. And I'm like, nah, I think Mike Tyson could really do that. I mean, his punches are devastating.
Deadly.
And I was just like, I don't know. That was like probably one of my favorite cameos. More of the surprise factor. I got like hyped off the surprise because I was like, what the hell? Like what's going on here? Like this shouldn't be in this movie. And I thought that was really entertaining.
There's a Vox video or so that I think that talks about his role in that movie, specifically about the language barrier, because like it's a language that they speak that is so tone driven. Right. And like a lot of Americans don't understand that so it's like they have this whole video talking about like his lines and like what they subtitle them to be versus if you speak Japanese and you listen to what he's saying are not the same thing because like Mike Tyson doesn't like naturally speak Japanese, right?
No.
Like,
I didn't even know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And there's a whole Vox video on it that's like pretty cool. And it talks about like tone driven languages that are mostly Asian languages that are much more like the tone and like fluctuation that you say certain words mean different things, but they could be the same word. And like it kind of dives into how like that applies to film. It's actually a really good video if anybody has a chance to check it out. I don't know what you search, Vox, Mike Tyson at Man 3 or something like that. Like see how that goes out. But it is an interesting little video.
I don't know how none of us said Mike Tyson in The Hangover. I thought it was just MMA. I would have said that shit.
Okay, so those are the types of roles I love, though. That's kind of those are the roles I love, where it's like Mike Tyson didn't need to be in The Hangover, but it's fucking incredible that he is.
And he's just singing "In the Air Tonight." Fucking Phil Collins and just knocks him out.
Yeah, like those are the roles I love to have fighters cameo in. I think those are hilarious. But so, kind of tailoring off of that, is there a current fighter or martial artist of any kind that you guys know and recognize that you guys would like to see in a project that maybe it hasn't really been featured a whole lot of? And I'll start because I wanted to bring this up as my favorite fighter, but he hasn't done quite enough. Have you guys been watching Patty the Batty?
Yeah, I love Patty.
The guy, Kirby, if you get a chance to check this guy out, this guy has some of the funniest goddamn interviews you'll ever see. This guy has like OG Conor McGregor style energy, and he's full Irish, but he's not like calling a bunch of people out. He's like, my next fight, I want to fight Jeff Bezos, you dirty prick, you're a bully. Or like Mark Zuckerberg, give me my goddamn account back. Like, fuck you, Instagram and all this. He's not calling out other fighters. He's just doing saying all this outlandish shit. And he's just super low. I think he'd be great in some film project. I think he would add a lot of like humor to it, actually. I think it'd be a funny way to do it. Yeah. Seth, what you got?
Derek Lewis. I fucking love that guy.
Yes.
I just like from his first interview, he's like, "How you feeling?" "My balls are sweaty."
My balls are hot.
My balls are hot.
Takes off his fight shorts in the ring, talking to Joe Rogan on a pay-per-view fight in the UFC. This man's a signed UFC fighter.
Like I want him in like a new season of like Always Sunny or just like Workaholics, like come back or just some funny ass episode. Like he's great.
That's actually I'm gonna circle back. The full cameo I want is Derek Lewis, Patty the Batty, and Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know if you guys have been watching him at all. He's the guy that's doing shoeies on the side of the ring after every single fight. and is like walking out to Destiny's Child and all this like crazy shit. And I want those three in like an It's Always a Sunny style show and just see how that plays out.
Wait, what's Tua doing there?
Tua Tagovailoa?
Yeah.
What do you mean? How do you mean? Not Tua Tagovailoa. Oh, I'm sorry. Not the football player.
No,
I was like, wait a minute now. What's he doing involved in this?
Holy shit.
The Chewy guy. I know who you're
I'm sorry, I was confused. I was like, when did he get?
He's
like Justin Bieber for Floyd Mayweather? What's happening?
No, he's a Pacific guy. It's God damn it. What the hell is his name? I totally forgot what his name is.
Tavisa. Ty Tavisa.
Ty Tuivasa. Ty Tuivasa. Thank you.
Okay.
Not even Tua. Ty.
I was like, oh shit, man.
Ty Tuivasa. That dude is those three together, and it's all and it's in a It's Always Sunny style sitcom show. I want to see that. That's my take. Gums, what you got?
I actually would love to see the story loosely portrayed of Nate Diaz. Like, I'd like to see Nate Diaz in like some, not even a biopic, just like a down and out fighter, like kind of how that movie The Fighter was, but like with Nate Diaz. Yeah. Like, I would really love to see him star in something like that. I think he actually has a crazy ass story. I think he's like, I don't know, there's something about that dude that it's like, even when he's fucking around, it seems really real. And so you're kind of like, man, like, I don't know. I feel like his acting chops would be good. Or I'd like to see like Francis, how do you say his last name? Ngoku or something like that?
Ngannou. Francis Ngannou.
Ngannou. I'd like to see him as like Conan. I mean, I'd like, you know what I mean? Like, I'd like to bring some of these guys into like, I think that would just be really fun. And just some type of like medieval, because French Conan or something. Because I think he's like French, right? He comes from like somewhere over there.
He's African, but he's from like a French acquired. I think it's like New Guinea or something like that. Or it's a fucking French colony, slave colony, basically. Like, I would love to have that, but like set in like 1000 BC, and he's just like Conan, you know what I mean? I love the Nate Diaz call out. I think that biopic would be awesome. And low-key, I think a Francis biopic would be really good too. Yeah. Kind of that conversation of how he like traveled over from Africa to be the heavyweight champ.
He's got a crazy story too, talking about like pounding sand type shit.
Yeah. I think that'd be a huge one.
But those are the two I'd like to see, and I'd actually like to see them in more like darker type roles and like more darker and like, and actually I would love it if Francis didn't even talk during his whole movie. Like, I just want him to be about his business. You know what I'm saying though? Like, because he's such a big dude, and I just would love to see him like walk around like that ancient area and just like conquering shit and like taking shit, and then
where he's just on site the whole movie.
Oh, the whole movie. It would just get me so amped. And he's like big enough to do it, and like he has the qualities to do it. And he's actually a really, really nice guy. So for him to play that role would be amazing, because it's just like I'm positive he could do it. And plus, we need one of these movies. We just need a barbarian movie where nobody says shit the whole time and it's always just on site, you know? I miss it. Anyways, those are my two.
Fair.
And those types of movies. That's what I want.
Fair enough. Kirby, let's take us home.
Well, prior to this weekend, I would have said I'd love to see more like Gina Carano, because I think that she's got pretty good like comedic timing. She can do the physical aspects of it. But after going to the Fluffy show, I just really want to see Canelo Alvarez in like an English-speaking role.
Dude, so we saw Gabriel Iglesias in Vegas, and he does this whole bit about Canelo speaking English. And it was one of the funniest goddamn things I think.
It was great. It was like him speaking English versus speaking Spanish, and how he sounds extremely competent in Spanish, and as soon as he starts speaking English, like it just all goes out the window. So I just love to see that in a movie now.
That's a good call out. I'm in on that.
He's just always like messing up in English and getting him into weird situations.
Yes. Oh, that'd be great.
Oh man, that's a good one. That's a good call out. So I'm going to circle back here, and I'm going to close this out with this. I talked a little bit earlier about how like a lot of these movies can go in those two directions of just really well story driven or just like wildly corny. And it does feel like for every great just like loved movie that is in this space. There are 5 movies that are just insanely corny and they're just wild in their own right. Is there a movie that you can recommend that fits in that category of it's so bad it's great? And I'll go back the other way around to finish this off. Kirby, where are you at?
All right, so there's this movie called Master of the Flying Guillotine.
That's a great movie,
with
sir.
a name like that, it's got to be good.
Oh yes, that's hitting the list for sure.
So it is about a one-armed martial arts master being stalked by an assassin who is blind. And his weapon is the flying guillotine, which is basically a fucking hat with a chain, and you throw the hat on somebody's head and it comes out as blades and it decapitates them. It is the most impractical fucking weapon ever, but it is so goddamn hilarious. And he has to he fights I think it's 3 different people in a kind of a tournament type thing, if I remember correctly. And one of them's a yoga master whose arms stretch like Dhalsim from Street Fighter. Yep. And yeah, it is one of those movies where it's what the fuck am I watching? But I'm not turning it off.
Oh yeah, that sounds exactly like what I was looking for in this question.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
It came out, I think, in the mid to late 70s, so 75, 76, I think. So it's kind of that era of just special effects and stuff. It's all practical effects and shit like that, but it's ridiculous.
Oh man, so definitely one that's added to the weekend watch list. Okay, Gums, what you got?
Get really high and watch it.
That sounds like that, or that just drunk off my ass. Honestly,
I think there's a lot of movies that I could pick, so I'm just gonna pick one that is pretty that I kind of drew out of the hat. Let's say I had 10 of these movies in a hat. I do want to give an honorable mention to the movie called The Guyver. It came out in the 90s.
Yes.
It's just a sick movie. It's action based. It has a lot of martial arts in it, but it is about a kind of like a Power Rangers. It's
it's straight up a Power Rangers type thing.
Yeah, it's Kirby, how do I explain this? What's the bugs that strap on to humans? Parasites.
It's like a parasite.
It's like an alien parasite fucking geosuit that basically makes you a Power Ranger, and it's the sickest thing I've ever seen. And you fight,
and it looks dope
monsters.
as shit too.
It still holds up. You fight monsters with it. Anyways, the movie that I pick is going to be Jet Li's Unleashed.
Oh,
and basically in this movie, Jet Li is a fighter as a young kid. They just raised him to only fight. So he's like a dog. So the whole movie is predicated around him being a fucking dog, literally with a collar. And he goes and kills his captors and does all types of other crazy shit. But go watch Jet Li's Unleashed. Came out in 2005. Morgan Freeman's in there and shit. The point is, he literally wears a collar like a dog. They send him out there to kill people in 1v1 fights, and then he ends up escaping and then kind of killing the people that he's escaping from. So
it's great.
Unleashed.
I don't know why, but I hear Jet Li and I'm automatically in. It
oh yeah,
doesn't matter. I'm already there.
But that was the one that's this is so bad it's good, because what? Jet Li's a dog.
Watching it.
And he has an American name or some shit, like Danny the dog or something. Maybe that's a different movie. I'm not sure. But.
Real quick on the Guyver too. It's stars Mark Hamill. So Luke Skywalker is that's a Mark Hamill film right there.
He's been in everything.
He really has. He's touched on so much of random
his Joker
shit.
voice is phenomenal.
What? As in he directed it, right? Not as in he was the fucking star. Was he the star?
No, he was starring Mark Hamill. Yeah.
No fucking way.
Yeah. He wasn't the dude that was the Guyver, but on the movie poster and shit, it's Mark Hamill, and he plays a CIA agent or something like that.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fair.
You're thinking about it do I need to watch this movie again?
I've seen this movie so many times, and he was not the lead, but that makes sense.
Not the lead, but he was the star power behind it.
If you're going to watch a Guyver movie, though, I 100% recommend the Guyver Dark Hero, which is the second one, because the second one is just all base. no fucking music. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, yo, we're getting in here. We're getting dirty, baby. Let's go kill some of these things. Anyways.
Seth, what you got?
So I have two. The first one is Three Ninjas at High Noon, because that movie is fucking awesome.
I've seen that one. That one's a 100% in this category.
Love it.
That movie is fantastic. And then the other one is Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
Yes.
Because it's a fucking fighting cow.
Yes.
Awesome.
It's a cow that knows Kung
The
Fu.
Matrix
question.
bullet time with the milk flying.
Is High Noon the one with Hulk Hogan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Just
the
wanted to
only
make sure.
good one. They're all good. It's like a trilogy of movies, but that one's my favorite.
Enter the Fist was mine. That was one that was like, they just stood out. You're like, dude, this is, you can't like be talking about this guy without leaving this out here. You're like, what the fuck is this movie? It just did not need production whatsoever. Like,
Literally a martial arts cow. Like, what?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
His
man.
what was his was it not squirrel nunchucks? It was like the woodchucks or whatever. Like that shit was hilarious.
Dude.
Yeah.
There's so much nonsense in a lot of these movies, and like this kind of goes more into the thing of like when we talked at the beginning of there's so many movies in this space that like we've talked about 3 or 4 movies. There are like full libraries of movies that we could say like this are just like there's a bunch that are just iconic you have to watch. There's a bunch that are so terrible, but if you need a good laugh and you're doing nothing on a Sunday, you should totally pop it in. So if anybody is listening to this and is curious about this area, just go search 70s, 80s martial arts films and just dive deep into this rabbit hole because it is wild. But that is everything I had for you guys today. I had a bunch of fun leading this. Wanted to say thanks, Seth, for letting me drive this one today and just go nuts a little bit. So without further ado, Gums, take us off.
Yeah. So someone once said, don't train so you can fight. Train so you can restrain someone from fighting. And then as Great Ninjas once said, cowabunga, dude. Let's keep it rolling.